Taylor gives the sign, the wind, and the pitch. Ground ball back to the middle. Lawson knocks it down, picks it up, underhands, and that'll do it. Put Spurs on this one. An amazing comeback by the Gamecocks, and they win the series over number 17 Vanderbilt. Your final score is 10-9.
How about that? Gamecock baseball right back in the thick of things and then some. After this past weekend, we saw it a week ago today. We were talking about it, Bill. An absolute huge weekend on tons of fronts, offensively mostly, but a sweep at home against LSU. We have not seen this thing on the road, and we certainly haven't seen it in comeback fashion like we saw this weekend, down 7-0 on Friday, come all the way back and win 8-7, and then yesterday down 3 runs 2 separate times, including in the 7th, 8th inning there where they're down 9-6, and the Gamecocks come back and win it, and they do it both of those games by manufacturing the game-winning run. And if I feel like Carolina baseball has been kind of on the other end of this thing for the last year and a half or so, but the baseball certainly bouncing Carolina's way and leaving Nashville winning 2 out of 3.
Bouncing the way, but they're making things happen. All of a sudden, we've talked about it, confidence and having fun and caring and believing and all these, I guess, question marks that we've had for the last several weeks, and it looks to me like it's clicked. And I think there's
what a hype, but
doesn't it, like, we've talked about this for a week, and all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it's it's that
Did you
weird
see the game Saturday. It was 8-1 Saturday. They got whipped.
It's 1 out of 3.
They got outscored by 5 runs in the series,
and they've just beaten LSU and Vanderbilt.
Oh yeah, they won 5 out of 6 against those two programs.
I never understand how you get so into the aggregate score of the weekend.
It's the best. It's the best measure of how the series is played.
No, I don't agree. No, I don't. I mean, the aggregate score?
Yeah. It's the best measure of the entire series.
See, because
baseball, there's a reason they play 162 games in the big leagues.
Yeah, but
there's a reason they play 56 regular season games.
It's like like you said, they come back twice. They win the series this weekend. They had a bad game. Adam Hill again struggles on Saturday, but again, all of a sudden they were 1-5 in conference play. Now they sit here at 11-10 today, a winning record in conference play. They've won 10 out of their since that 1-5 start. Obviously, a totally different team, 10-5. They're 5-1 against very good competition in the last 2 weeks, not counting the midweek game. Now you get Ole Miss and you get Texas A&M to wrap up they're in Missouri to wrap up the remainder of the regular season. Whatever clicked. And not that I'm a baseball expert and can say, they figured the bats and they changed the philosophy. I know last week it was kind of the running joke about the pitching machine and being able to go back and work with the pitching machine and make adjustments to the swings. But certainly right now, Mark Kingston has pressed some buttons, done something correctly. Players have started to buy in. I don't know. I don't think anybody has the answer. They just look like a team who's playing with a lot of confidence and getting hot at the right part of the season.
It was a very interesting series on a lot of different fronts, and the fact that the Gamecocks end up on the right side of this thing is huge from a lot of different standpoints. SEC standings, you mentioned 11-10. It feels a lot different than sitting one game under 500 with 3 series left. So one game above 500 as it pertains to the standings. Right now, Carolina 1 game back of Georgia for second place in the SEC East. Looks like Florida's going to cruise. They've got a 4-game lead when it comes to the SEC East. And
you're talking about the East, yeah. The overall South Carolina is, I think, in 4th in a tie for 5th right now.
Getting there. So Arkansas and Ole Miss are better than Carolina on the West, but that's it. So you got 4 teams ahead of Carolina in the overall SEC standings in Florida, Georgia, Arkansas, and Ole Miss, and the Gamecocks so sit there in a tie for 5th overall if you're going with the overall SEC standings at 11-10. Other 11-10 teams, Vanderbilt, the one that Carolina just played, obviously, and Texas A&M, who will finish the SEC regular season. They'll do it that series in College Station. Now it's Ole Miss who will come to town this weekend, one of the best teams in the country, but sitting at just a game better than the Gamecocks in the SEC standings, but 34-11 overall. And then Missouri after that in Columbia, the final 3 regular season series. I put it out on Twitter last night. I feel like as opposed to where Carolina has played the entire season, really. I feel like right now they might be on the right side of the bubble when it comes to NCAA tournament play. You look at an RPI, if that helps you out at all. Just the win yesterday improved Carolina's RPI by 14 spots. So Saturday, after an 8-1 loss, they're 59th in the country, and today they're sitting at 45. I thought it would be a little bit higher because they went into the weekend at 50th, I think, from this RPI deal. Take that for what it's worth. The SEC is going to have a bunch of teams in this thing. The question will be whether they can beat their record of 10 and get 11 teams in, and I think 12 really in the conversation at this point. But the main thing for, I think, Gamecock baseball at large is you see a series on the road against a good team where games could go either way, and twice on Friday and then on Sunday, this team figured out a way to win against a quality team on the road and win, I think, the first SEC series that Vandy has given up at home this year. That's the difference, Bill.
No, I'm with you. And again, whatever it is, whether it's confidence or just momentum or everything is kind of coming together for this team who now believes they're never out of it, no matter the score. I mean, that one on Friday night, to me, certainly yesterday being down 3 runs twice and rallying to win, but the one on Friday night is kind of the amazing when you get down 7-0 rather quickly. And a lot of people probably like me and said, well, all right, we'll check back with them on Saturday and see how they do in the Saturday game. And then all of a sudden later on you look back and like, oh, won 8-7, huh? Well, how about that? That's some news. And right now, again, a lot of confidence. Mark Kingston all of a sudden looks a lot smarter, probably feels a lot happier, probably appreciates a little bit more coverage. And now you just got to keep it going. Exams this week, so no midweek game before getting that series with Mississippi. And then next week, the College of Charleston, followed up by Missouri, another home series, USC Upstate in there, and Texas A&M. And as you said, I think you're right. I don't know. I would assume that based on this past weekend and where things stand, that South Carolina is on the right side of the NCAA tournament bubble.
But ultimately, it doesn't matter where they stand right now. It matters how they finish up these last 9 regular season SEC games and in a couple of non-conference games. So you got 11 games left. You've got 26 wins right now, 26-18 overall, but 11-10, the impressive part right now in conference play for the Gamecocks. So quite the weekend on the baseball field. Interesting weekend with football, as it pertains to football. I was going to say on the football field, but of course the draft has nothing to do really with on the football field. But we were talking here Friday about Hayden Hurst going number 25 overall, Baltimore Ravens. We had his buddy Perry Orthen here just talking about what a journey it's been and best case scenario really for a guy who tried in baseball and thought he might be a first-round pick in baseball back in the day, ends up that baseball career didn't work out, but he fights his way into the first round of the NFL draft and will be going on to a very bright future in Baltimore is probably the best way to put that. Thought there would be some opportunities, especially for a guy like Sky Moore to get drafted. He didn't go drafted. No other Gamecock got drafted this year, which was a bit surprising. So it's Hayden Hurst is the lone Gamecock draft pick in the last 2 years for Carolina football. We'll update you on where guys will get their free agent shots. And going into this weekend, Bill, I wanted to point out that getting drafted is not the end-all, be-all, and there have been several good Gamecock examples recently of going undrafted and yet going on to be a Super Bowl champion, and Darian Stewart for the Denver Broncos, Pat DeMarco, all the way to the Super Bowl, I guess I should say, with the Atlanta Falcons.
Did Lim Jean-Pierre win a Super Bowl with the Seahawks? I know he's with them. I know he's on the staff. I didn't realize that till this weekend. He's on the staff with the Raiders now as kind of, I think, an offensive line. I don't want to say a graduate assistant because that's not what they are, but I want to say he's another one that you chalk up as an undrafted player, I believe, that went on and I believe won a Super Bowl.
So you have those examples, and now a lot of Gamecock players from last year will try to add their names to that, including Sky Moore, a bit surprising over the weekend. So we'll get into more details for you on that. The current Gamecocks now have a future Gamecock and a commit happening for everybody who's up on recruiting over the weekend. We'll give you details on that as well. And NBA playoffs obviously heating up. I know you were checking out the NHL playoffs as well. Plenty of insights for us.
Good weekend of all that. And a whole bunch of alligator action down in New Orleans. It seemed like every time the PGA Tour had a highlight, it involved someone running from an alligator or an alligator splashing out of the water. Kind of an interesting time down there. Pretty good tournament yesterday.
Yeah, the old Zurich Classic. Give you the details on that. I know Kevin Kisner, the South Carolina native, heavily involved there. Sky Moore and company not drafted over the weekend for the Gamecocks after Hayden Hurst went in the first round, 25th overall on Thursday night. So where will some of these Gamecocks get a shot in the NFL? Let's start with Sky Moore. First of all, your reaction for a guy who led Carolina in tackles all 4 seasons not getting drafted in the NFL.
Surprised. Not even late in the run. It makes me wonder, was there something on his physical that stood out? I don't think he had a particularly good 40 time at the Combine, but at least most people at the Combine thought, aside from that he performed fairly well. So I'm guessing that he's just going to end up being your NFL GMs looked at him as your typical tweener. A little bit too small to be outside linebacker, not big enough, or excuse me, a little bit too big to be a safety, a little bit too small to be an outside linebacker. It's going to be kind of fascinating to see how he fits in with the Colts and what impact he can make, because you feel like they get a steal. I mean, you feel like they get just a good football player, but we'll find out. I was very surprised by that. I thought somebody would scoop him up late in the draft, 5th, 6th, more likely 7th round, and spend a pick on that and see what they were getting in him.
To me, it's shocking when I see something like this, a guy who could not have had much more of a productive college career, right? We've seen a bunch of really good Carolina players, but I don't think we've ever seen a Carolina football player be more productive in his college career and not get drafted. You know no one off the top of your head?
No, not for South Carolina, but I go back and I don't know what all went into it, but the Michael Sam situation, because you still had he got drafted the 7th round, I think.
It was somewhere down
late. It was very very late, and
but there
obviously
were other extenuating circumstances around that situation.
Yeah, I always wonder about that and how much that played into it. I do agree with you. Now, as far as it relates to South Carolina, like you said, other guys who've had pretty productive careers. No, I think that's selling him short. Like, he goes on the all-time defense, right? At Carolina, he led the team. Yeah,
but
again, when you have a neck injury like that,
right.
I don't know what was in the physical.
Sure, that is
could be an extenuating. Yeah, so it's hard for me.
But it seemed like to me there didn't look to be any kind of issue. excuse me, this year on the field for Sky Moore, right?
Right. That would be my guess. I mean, it kind of goes back to the old P.J. Dozier thing that we've discussed before, where, look, we were surprised he didn't get drafted. It wasn't so much of a shock that...
But in the NBA, you have to draft more for a 6-year career, let's say, at your first team. I think your first contract runs out before then. The NFL, it stands for not for long for a reason. Mm-hmm. To me, it's not quite the same thing where you're looking and you're worried about your reputation drafting a guy in the late rounds for years down the line. I don't see that at all. You're just trying to improve your football team. And I would assume, based on, when you see a guy like David Williams get drafted, the former Gamecock running back, transferred over to Arkansas and had a pretty productive senior season. Let's not, I don't mean to sell him too short, but if you're going to compare David Williams' Carolina career to Sky Moore's Carolina career, it's like 100-1, right? Somewhere in there. If you're putting a number beside these things, Sky Moore's career, 100, and David Williams' career, 1 at Carolina.
So I was out on Saturday afternoon out on the lake, and we had gone to a restaurant, and we're sitting there, and they had some TVs up, and one of the guys that I was with made the point. They said, David Williams got drafted. And I thought, all right, we got to cut him off. He can't.
Clearly, he saw the name and didn't realize it wasn't the same. And
I was like, no, there's no way. And that honestly,
he got drafted before Bo Scarborough at Alabama.
I'll admit, coming in this morning, one of the poll questions I thought about asking, more surprising, David Williams got drafted or Sky Moore didn't get drafted? What surprised you more? Because I'll be honest, for me, it was David Williams being drafted. Now, David Williams was, to his defense, a fantastic student athlete at the University of South Carolina. And the reason I say that is because the guy didn't get in trouble. Like, he did everything you wanted.
You're fantastic.
To me, it does. You stayed out of trouble.
Expectations. That's the Chris Rock line. People brag about not going to jail. You're not supposed to go to jail.
Yeah, but the way everything played out for him. But again, statistically speaking, even this past year, it's not like he set the world on fire at Arkansas. And so with all that in mind...
Yeah, but he's a workout guy. Like, he's a numbers guy. It's why a lot of Gamecock fans were always shaking their head and just waiting for him to have his breakout year, right? He came in good numbers, good 40 times. The measurables were there. He just never figured it out on the field for Carolina. Did so much more so for Arkansas in his senior year, but still not any numbers that are going to blow you away.
This past year, 117 carries, 656 yards, and 8 touchdowns.
Right.
I mean, like
pretty
you said,
solid, productive.
But to me, that was kind of the surprising part of the weekend. But Sky Moore not being drafted, just not at all. That was pretty. I thought again somebody late the final 2 rounds would probably take a chance on him. I was a little surprised when I saw that he ended up not being selected at all.
I guess I'm trying to think of other Carolina players with really, really good careers who didn't make it in the pros. Ryan Brewer maybe pops up in my head from a football standpoint, but he had injuries as well that kind of limited him. I think he got his shot and played some NFL Europe back in the day. I think maybe this is almost equating to B.J. Mackey from a Carolina athletic career perspective, where one of, if not the best basketball players in South Carolina basketball history, never made it to the NBA. Sky Moore, maybe he fits in that same mold because B.J. Mackey wasn't big enough to play a 2-guard in the NBA, in the pros, and wasn't really a point guard. And Sky Moore, as that tweener thing, he's going to get his shot to go the free agent route with the Indianapolis Colts. Other guys who will get their shots, cornerback Jamarcus King going to the Oakland Raiders. A couple of guys going out to Seattle, and Ulrich Jones, going out to Seattle. A couple of guys going to the New Orleans Saints. I'm trying to get you the exact guys headed out there. That's who you got going to the Saints off the top of your head.
Helms and Taylor Stallworth.
Corey Helms and Taylor Stallworth, a couple of linemen, the offensive lineman and Helms, and the defensive lineman and Stallworth. And I'm getting that confused with Allen Knott and Dante Sawyer, also getting their free agent shots. Allen Knott heading to the Kansas City Chiefs, and Dante Sawyer headed to the San Francisco 49ers. So all these guys will get shots to make NFL teams, but all of them kind of behind the 8 ball and will have to prove themselves with nothing really invested in them from a draft standpoint. It's going to be a difficult road, not impossible. And like we mentioned the other guys before, Super Bowl champions and Lemuel Jean-Pierre and Pat DeMarco and Darian Stewart, they have done it and shown that it can be done. But the most surprising by far is Sky Moore, because to me he is at least a special teamer in the NFL, right? I mean, you can do that no problem because he's so athletic and obviously a really good tackler. I would think that if you can't find a way to put him on the field in a traditional scheme defensively, you could certainly get him going from a special team standpoint. I understand, though, you don't get drafted as a special teams guy. I get that.
Yeah, and one other guy, I apologize if you mentioned him, I missed it, Chris Lamons going to the Falcons. And so several Gamecock guys are going to go get their free agent deals and see what they can do. With Sky Moore, you and I kind of discussed this last year with Mason Zandy to an extent. You get into the last 2 rounds, the 6th, 7th round, you actually kind of hope to not get drafted because then you can go and kind of find the best fit for you. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know all about the Colts linebacking core and where Sky Moore can fit into that, but that may have ended up being a blessing, whereas you mentioned trying to make the roster, trying to work your way onto the team. Whatever the depth is in Indianapolis at the linebacker position, maybe that fits Sky Moore and where he can go in and make an impact a little bit more immediate, not only at linebacker, but also, as you just said, on special teams.
Anything else stand out to you there in the rounds? We had 2 through 3 on Friday and then 4 through 7 on Saturday. The national headline was Shaquem Griffin from Central Florida joining his twin brother with the Seattle Seahawks and getting his shot there. He's the guy who famously does not have a left hand and has clearly kind of captured everybody's heart with how he played and now how he's approached everything and doesn't see himself as handicapped at all and clearly has not let that stop him.
No, I think, again, after the excitement of kind of the first day, and the way it went with the quarterbacks, I thought that was kind of fascinating and how everything played out with Josh Allen, Josh Rosen in particular, but also, of course, Baker Mayfield. You look at, obviously, what the Panthers were able to do, trying to draft defensive backs once again. Dante Jackson out of LSU, and then Rashawn Golden out of Tennessee in the 3rd round. They go with a tight end in the 4th round. I did like the Marquise Haynes for the Panthers, the Marquise Haynes pick in the 4th round, trying to add a little bit more on the defensive line as you've got some guys aging there. So I thought overall they did a pretty good job, was pretty I think that the Panthers, if you're a Panthers fan this morning, you kind of like what they were able to add throughout the entire draft, not just with the first pick of DJ Moore. But, I thought, again, it was a pretty – aside from the David Williams thing, which really caught my attention on Saturday, and the Sky Moore thing, a pretty low-key draft on Friday and Saturday after a pretty exciting Thursday night.
Interesting that the Baltimore Ravens went after another tight end in the third round, tight end from Oklahoma. Mark Andrews is his name, to give Hayden Hurst a little immediate competition for sure. I thought that was a bit surprising that they went after a tight end so high there, but we've seen in the NFL you definitely have to have more than one tight end that can go, and they obviously have a couple of tight ends already in place as well, so they were just looking to get younger there, more depth. Shaquem Griffin, by the way, goes in the 5th round to the Seattle Seahawks, so he didn't have to wait too long on Saturday to become the feel-good story of the entire draft for sure. You hear more from Gamecock baseball yesterday, the game-winning run coming off the bat of Hunter Taylor.
The 3-2 to Taylor. Lifted well to deep left center field. Backing up on it, Jones. This will be plenty deep enough as Olsen tags, and he will come charging home. And the Gamecocks finally, in the 9th, take the lead. It is 10-9. Hunter Taylor does it again.
Derek Scott on the call there for the Gamecock IMG Radio Network, and that was the only lead Carolina had yesterday, down 3 runs a couple of different times, and that was a solid at-bat and just a solid sequence for Carolina. So Jacob Olsen gets on. He's the leadoff man. I think he walked to get on base. Behind him, Noah Campbell comes up. He's the 9th hole guy, or hitting the 8th hole yesterday, I believe. It's a tie ball game. In the 9th inning, you need 1 run. Mm-hmm. So the obvious call there is to bunt him. He's a pretty good bunter. He bunts for base hits every now and again. He did not have a successful at-bat bunting the ball. He ended up striking out. So Hunter Taylor, the 9-hole guy, comes up next, and I believe they call a hit and run because it was a swing and miss from Taylor. Olsen steals second base, though. It was going to be a close play at second, and the throw ended up getting away. I believe he stays at second base. The next pitch, or the pitch after that, or the next at-bat, the next sequence of that at-bat, I should say, they try to pick off Olsen at second base and throw it into center field, so he's over to walk over to third base. Still with 1 out, Hunter Taylor gets a ball up in the outfield, which is exactly what you're trying to do in that situation. It was plenty deep enough to bring Olsen in, and the Gamecocks, without a hit and missing a sacrifice bunt, get a guy across the plate. This is a situation that seemingly has gone time and time again here in the last several seasons against Carolina, and teams have done that against them to find ways to win. And then you got to throw in Graham Lawson, a guy Carolina has not counted on, out of the bullpen, finishes his 2nd straight shutout inning where he came on in the 8th inning with 2 guys on, nobody out, got out of that inning without any runs. Lawson comes on in the 9th and closes things out. A dramatic finish for Carolina, a dramatic series. The comeback win down 7-0 on Friday started things off.
Yeah, and again, how much of it does it go back to Sunday previous against LSU where they rally and all of a sudden there's a confidence now that they're never out of the game? Because yesterday, the easiest thing in the world would have been to give up after you rally and tie the ball game, and then you give up 3 in the 8th, right? I mean,
they came back down 6-3, tied it up at 6, and then immediately Vandy goes up 9-6, going to the 8th inning.
And there's something to this ball club where they've been able to rally at different times. We've seen this. This is not new. We saw it against Clemson on the Sunday, where they came back. They couldn't quite pull it off, but they put themselves in position late in that ball game to win. And
not just there, though, but I mean that's added to the confusion of trying to sum up this team or figure it out, right? I mean, the Kentucky loss was embarrassing on a Friday night, 14-1. And then they bounce back and win 15-1 the next day. It doesn't make any sense. You blow out the defending national champions and number 1 ranked Florida Gators on the Saturday. So this team has had the ability to do those kind of things and bounce back. It's just closing things out from a series standpoint. That's the big difference this weekend. Doing it on the road as well, and now moving forward, Carolina on the right side of 500, 11-10 in SEC play, with 3 SEC regular season series left. Now they're not going to be easy.
All right.
Ole Miss is certainly one of the best teams in the country. That's this weekend. No midweek games this week because of exams. Then after this weekend, another home series against Missouri, and then you finish up at Texas A&M. 9 SEC regular season games left. You got a couple of non-conference midweek games left as well, with the College of Charleston over at Spirit Communication Park next week, and then USC upstate in the final week of the season.
They're in South Carolina's put themselves in position. They can, at this point, we say they control their own destiny, right?
No doubt.
Like, I mean, you just take care of business. You're not counting on anybody. You're not asking for help anywhere. You just go take care of business. And both of us said with 12 games to go, going back to last weekend, 12 SEC games to go, that if you could finish 6-6, you probably were going to get in. Finish 500 in conference. Well, now you're one game up on that. And again, a lot of confidence. And I'm expecting, a very good, energetic atmosphere throughout the weekend. You got a good team rolling in Mississippi for some games this weekend. Should be great weather. I think it's going to be a really good atmosphere down there. And again, that's what makes South Carolina baseball one of the best programs in the country. Is when the fans show up, that ballpark gets kind of rocking a little bit. You get kind of the nostalgia going. You get a little bit of that tradition going. We'll see if that kind of returns. It's been a while. I know the LSU series was good. The LSU series and the crowd turnout was great. But it's been a while since we've really seen that over there, right? It feels like the last few years there's been more tension in the ballpark because of the way things were going with Chad Holbrook and that program. There was a bit of a drop-off. We'll see how it goes this weekend, but I feel like there's a lot of momentum for this baseball team along with the fan base as you roll into this coming weekend.
Mm-hmm. And several standout guys. I mentioned what we saw last night out of the bullpen or yesterday afternoon from Graham Lawson and his standout performance. It was TJ Shook that Friday that really helped keep Carolina in it, down 7-0. He comes in out of the bullpen and goes 3 1/3, scoreless and hitless, and really shut down Vanderbilt the rest of the way. I mean, the Gamecock bullpen overall, Eddie Jamurius and Sawyer Bridges finished it out 6 1/3 shutout innings on Friday to allow Carolina to try to get back in that game, first of all, and then they did it. Now, the starting pitching is the concern at this point, giving up 7, 8, and 9 runs overall is what the Gamecocks gave up on the weekend. So an average of 8 runs per game, and a lot of that coming off of the Carolina starters. Adam Hill went the most out of the starting weekend rotation in 4 1/3 innings, I think is what he ended up going. So this is almost the opposite of the LSU series where you saw starting pitching dominate, especially early for Carolina. Logan Chapman and Adam Hill combining 16 1/3 shutout innings is how they started that series. This one went the opposite way. Carolina, if they can shore that up, going back home certainly does help, but an Ole Miss lineup that can hit it will be a tough challenge this weekend.
No, but it's the SEC. We've talked about that. The number of teams that are probably heading to the postseason, the strength of this conference. That's why I think, honestly, RPI is going to be kind of irrelevant when it comes to South Carolina getting into the postseason because the conference is so strong and who you've played on a week-in, week-out basis. I think it's going to offset some of the losses that they had in the non-conference portion, especially early on. Take care of business in conference. RPI won't matter as much, but that's because you're playing really good teams. There's no cupcakes remaining in the final 9 games of conference play.
Well, RPI is kind of crazy when you look at it from an SEC standpoint. Florida, the number 1 team in the country, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8, all from the SEC. Yeah. Arkansas, Auburn, Ole Miss, and Georgia, and then Texas A&M sits at 11. Kentucky at 15 with a sub-500 record.
Where did you say Mississippi was at?
Ole Miss is sitting at number 7 right now.
Yeah.
Auburn is not even 500 in the conference, and yet they have the number 6 RPI. Texas A&M just 1 game above 500 in conference play, like the Gamecocks at 11, and Kentucky sub-500 in conference play at 15 in the country. SEC baseball, that's what it is.